Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
In this episode, we're diving deep into the world of foraging, fermentation, and wildcrafted flavors. Our guest today is someone who has dedicated their life to exploring the edible landscape, transforming nature's overlooked ingredients to credible culinary creations. From wild beers and vinegar to sustainable cooking with invasive species, his work has influenced countless home cooks and chefs alike. Get ready for a fascinating conversation about harnessing the power of the wild pantry. Grab a seat, get a drink, and let's dive in.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
Thanks everybody for joining us tonight. Pretty excited about this episode. We'll go through a bit of an introduction and then I'll introduce our guest and we'll get down into conversation. We have a lot to talk about tonight, which I'm really excited about. But first up, so let's see. In our next podcast episode, we're going to be doing a stir-fry episode within the Wild Kitchen series, so it's going to be pretty cool. We're going to mix it up a little bit too and have some fun with the editing, I think, of that one, so stay tuned for that's a special show and give us some feedback if you'd like, and if you've got any food topics you'd like us to discuss, please let me know and let Adam know. Email or Instagram is probably the best way, and we'll happily create an episode around a question you may have. And then as far as news for me, off to pig camp next week. Pretty excited about that. And then upon my return, it kicks off turkey season here in Maryland. So those are my plans thus far. I think outside of that, the sausage book hit the world a week ago. And has been doing pretty good. We're going to start rolling out some products. We'll put a new shirt out this week and some other stuff as we go forward. So please keep an eye out for that. But other than that, I'll turn it over to you, Adam.
Not too much new. I'm just getting ready for the pig camp as well. And looking forward. I'm going to go fly into D.C. to visit Justin here a little early. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he's discovered in D.C. I haven't been in a few years, so looking forward to see what he's got to show me. Other than that, I'm just preparing for turkey. I'm waiting anxiously for all the snow and ice to melt. I feel like last spring I was saying the same thing. Everything's still under like a foot of snow and ice, and now it's snowing again outside. And I'm like, come on! I just want to get out foraging more again, so get those spring greens. But I think by the time we get back and everything, it will start to look a lot better for me. So getting excited for that.
I was just commenting to my wife today on our run how everything like at the park kind of by our house is starting to green back up again. So really excited for that here. Mm-hmm. Maybe we'll try if we can get out and do some foraging while you're here, Adam. I know we've just got a couple days, but we'll figure out something. All right, I'll go ahead and introduce our guest. Today's guest is a professional forager, wild food instructor, and a self-styled culinary alchemist. He's based in Los Angeles. He's the author of 4 books about wildcrafting, brewing, vinegar making, and fermentation. And he was named one of the 25 most influential tastemakers in LA by Los Angeles Magazine. Through his books and seminars, he has introduced thousands of home cooks, local chefs, and others to the flavors offered by the wild terroir of Southern California. Pascal Baudard, welcome to the Wild Fish and Game podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. Outside of sort of our the brief introduction that I gave you, could you sort of expand a little bit on your background? How did you get into foraging and fermenting, and really where you are today?
Okay, so I grew up in Belgium. So I'm a fake French, which is why I do a lot of beer and not wine. But I grew up in Belgium, and I grew up in a very big town, I think, of like 1,000 people, like a tiny town in Belgium. And there was nothing to do. So, aside from talking to my neighbor, which was a cow, which was kind of interesting. You wake up, it's like, how are you doing today? Meh. Anything interesting? Meh. Yeah. So aside from talking to the neighbor, I basically just spend most of my time in the forest or the surrounding. And my grandma is the one who actually introduced me to wild food, which was very, very common. There was no such a name as wild food and foraging. It was basically that some plants were edible, and then you were eating them because they were free and good for you. It was also very important for the older generation because they went through World War One, World War Two, and every time you had a war, people would go back to those foods, which were really accessible and super helpful. Mostly when people were starving, really. So she probably knew like 50, I would say 50 of the basic plant, including mushrooms and nuts too. So in Belgium, we had hazelnuts, walnuts, all kind of different, probably like 10 to 15 different basic mushroom, and maybe probably like 20 plants. You're talking like nettles, mustard, wild radish, chickweed, like basic stuff. And I kind of grew up learning about all those plants and using them, never thought about it twice. But I became more and more interested as time went along, as I was spending more time in the forest and really looking for mushroom and stuff. I really kind of wanted to do that with my life, to be honest, because it was so much fun on top of it. You spend all your time in the forest. But there was no school on the subject. So the only school on the subject, or the only book even on the subject, were a book about witchcraft. And I didn't want to be a witch. So I ended up being an artist, which was interesting. So I went to the Academy of Fine Art, and then I studied photography, painting, and all this stuff, which ended up being useful for my books. I do all my own photos and stuff. And then I went, and I ended up being a graphic artist for a very long time, for like 25 years. And I went back to wild food in 1999. Why? Well, obviously, the end of the world was about to happen. The Y2K.
Y2K.
So I know, Y2K. So I decided to do like some wild food class, not wild food, actually, there were some survival classes in 1999. And then some of the class included wild food. And I remember going to the first class that included wild food and say, you know what, I want to do this with my life. And I basically just started to train. And I think I spent the next 2 or 3 years doing 400 classes every weekend, like Saturday, Sunday. Every weekend I would do a class. So I would meet somebody who would teach me something about wild food or new plants. So you're talking botanists, survivalists, native people, cooks, other foragers, anybody who could teach me, including sometime I would go to an ethnic store and I would stay close to food, like olives. We have a lot of olives in California. Nobody knows how to prepare olives. So I would literally stand close to the olive stand and wait for the old Italian grandma. And when she shop, I'll say, please take me home, I'll pay you. And, and sometimes they will do. So I would learn how to I have look at this one. This is like a whole jar I have in my hand. And I probably collected like easily 30 to 40 pounds of olive this year. Super easy forage too, by the way. I mean, I could have collected 300 pounds, 400 pounds. That's not a problem. Yeah. And they're kind of like non-native too over here. Sometimes even consider invasive, to be honest. But anyway, so after doing those classes, I basically decided to do an experiment. And I said, I think I know enough. It's interesting when you're new to something, or like 3 or 4 years new to something, you think you know a lot. And now that I've done that for 25 years, I know. The more I do it, the more I understand I know nothing. So it keeps you humble. But, I thought I knew a lot. I said, you know what? I'm going to be surviving. I spent a whole year just eating wild food. And I think I can market that as a fantastic weight loss program. Because I lost so much weight. That was it was terrible. I realized I didn't know what I was doing. But anyway, it was basically a series of failure. But in the same time, I learned so much in the process, to figure out what was wrong and how I felt. And one thing I realized very fast is that if you were serious about wild food, it's really all about food preservation technique. Especially, and it's like that in any place, but like in Southern California, for example, during the winter, we may not get snow, but everything turns into a desert. So we have like nothing to eat. There's no more green or whatever. So our season for foraging is really like hardcore fruits, berries, and green. Start from January to probably July, and after that we get in trouble. Meaning that you start to get into like more obscure stuff, which is not a problem now, but at the time I didn't have enough knowledge to actually go through that period. Just so you know, I just finished a book about edible grains and seeds. And after July, it's really the time that you collect all your edible grains and seeds. And just in California alone, there is probably 200 edible grains and seeds I can collect. So I could totally do that now, spend a whole year just eating wild food because, a lot of those seeds are completely loaded with fat and protein. But anyway, so to go back, I realized that wild food was really about food preservation technique, and I decided to dedicate myself to study traditional food preservation technique. And what made me a little bit different from other foragers is the fact that I started to apply all this knowledge of traditional food preservation technique to wild food. So it was like, well, if I learn lacto fermentation, how can I apply that to wild food? If I learn yeast fermentation, how do I apply that to wild food? How do I make elderberry wine? How do I make wild beers? How do I make wild sodas? And then if I make those sodas and those beers, how can I turn them into vinegar? Because if I have vinegar, then I can start pickling and preserving food too. And then I went further and said, where the hell do I find my wild yeast in nature? Where the hell do I find my, lactobacteria in nature? And where do I find my acetobacter, which are the bacteria making vinegar in nature? So that was kind of like my process. And the last 3 books that I wrote, which was about vinegar, brewing, and then also lacto fermentation, if you think about it, it's also about foraging bacteria and microbes. So that's kind of why I did it, because I really wanted to be serious about food, about wild food. And I realized that our ancestor, or at least my ancestor, definitely were using all kind of different traditional food preservation technique to be able to survive and preserve that food.
Yeah, I love the dedication and the spirit that you gave it. Like it's great to see. I think a lot in modern times people talk about passion and dedication, but I don't think that people go as deep as that. And it's awesome. It's inspiring.
Mm-hmm. It's a disease. I'm sick in the head.
No, it's great because also too, I appreciate the fact that once you've gained the knowledge, you've shared it. And I think that's the key to showing someone who's really in love with a subject is they're willing to share it with other people, not just keep it for themselves.
Yeah, and it's also, I've learned from other people, and my main job is really to rediscover the past. So I managed to gain knowledge from somehow the things I've been able to scrounge up from research and stuff like that. So it makes sense to me that, I can write it and then it's kind of like pass it on to the next generation. And I really think it's important knowledge. I have a different perspective, I think, of wild food and foraging and also those invasive plants. I have to tell you, like in a city like Los Angeles, a good example would be olive. We have like whole neighborhoods that are completely lined up, with olive trees. Nobody knows how to preserve them. We have, if you look at the hills around Los Angeles during springtime, late spring, everything turns yellow, and it's all from mustard leaves, mustard flowers. And we probably have like 16 different wild mustard that exist, or plants from the Brassica family. And I would say half of them are crops in different countries. But over here in America, or at least in actually I would say in America, but also in Southern California, people are going to bitch about it because they basically, oh my God, those are invasive plants, pooey, let's destroy them. And there are no positive solution. Your only solution is really you're going to spray Roundup on it or similar poison. I call those poison because they really poison the environment for years. Or you do what you call habitat restoration. That means you're going to collect those plants and then just throw them away. So if you think about it, I live I don't live in Los Angeles anymore, but I live like 90 minutes from Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, you have people who cannot afford, organic food or regular food.
Yeah.
And here we are with all those, thousands of acres of invasive plants like black mustard and stuff. I have in my hand, like I was just in the middle of making a ferment about black mustard right here. I have a whole big bowl in my hand and I'm going to do like the fermentation on it. I have to tell you, my big epiphany that occurred for me was 6 or 7 years ago. It happened really when I was in the middle of a supermarket looking at all the food. And I was looking at all this food that was available, and I realized that I have access to probably 200 different plants. None of them are available, non-native plant. I'm not even talking about the native. I could go to probably 400 plants, even up to 700 possibly, if I was including native plant, like if I include the seeds and the mushroom and all this stuff. But the choice that you have at the store was very, very minimal. And not only that, but I realized that the biggest food waste in Los Angeles was not people, wasting food at home or even a restaurant wasting food. It was not using the resource that we have locally. I mean, we have thousands of acres of plants, non-native plants that, people are bitching about, which are really crops in different countries, and yet we just plain don't use them, Black mustard for me is a bonus. I mean, I have like several pounds of leaves in my hand right here that I'm going to ferment, but I can collect the seeds and I'm doing my own, I make my own, let me see if I have my own like Dijon mustard using all those different mustard seeds that I collect. My phone is actually, that's why I could not find it. My phone was leaning against it. This is actually the real Dijon mustard, made with, so I make several jars every year.
Oh, wow.
So it's really gourmet food. I serve that to my class and people are blown away. They're going like, wow, the flavor compared to what you buy at the store is unbelievable. But yet this is coming from plant that nobody wants, So not only you also have food waste, but one of the problem with modern agriculture is also the lack of choice.
Yeah.
And a good example, for example, would be potatoes. People go to the store and say, well, I'm going to go buy potatoes. How much choice do you have?
Maybe like
how many
3 or
potatoes
4.
You gonna find?
Yeah, yellow, red, and white.
Right. So how many potatoes exist in the world?
Probably hundreds and hundreds.
Hundreds,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Are you ready? 4,000.
Wow.
So you're being offered 4, and people are like super happy. You're like, oh my God, I got like 4 of this choice. And then you go in the store, you have all these choices and everything, but the reality is you get 4,000 different type of potatoes, and you're only given four. You know,
And
that's
each
what I'm
one
saying.
probably
Like,
has its own benefits and better ways of cooking, and like instead of the all-purpose. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Same thing, for example, with vinegar. You go to the store and you go like, okay, I want to get some vinegar. You're gonna get like 5 vinegars. So 5 vinegars, you get fake balsamic vinegar, you have wine vinegar, you have apple cider vinegar. So you get like 5 or 6. I can make vinegar with anything that I want to. I can make my own elderberry wine and turn it into vinegar. I can make blackberry wine vinegar. I can actually turn pretty much anything into vinegar. I found the trick on. I can even make Coca-Cola vinegar if I wanted to, by the way. but I like to stay with the natural stuff. But if you can ferment anything, then you can turn anything into vinegar. So I have a jar right now in my hand. With it's for a class this weekend, and I'm making apple cider vinegar. And I have organic apple that are fermenting, and I'm going to turn that into vinegar. And the thing that's fantastic is you realize that the flavor, once you get the flavor from the wild and the true flavor, that the land can offer, it's difficult to go back to,
Yeah.
it's difficult to go back. Like if I make my own apple cider vinegar, it's going to taste 100 times better than the one that you buy at the store. Here a good example. Again in my hand I have like this is a nettle beer, stinging nettle beer. This is like no, not a beer, so a wine. I'm doing a lot of work on herbal wine right now, which is an old tradition in Europe. People used to make wine with all kinds of different plants, including leaves, by the way. So if I make a wine, well, guess what? I can turn it into vinegar. Try going to any store and say, "Can you give me a stinging nettle vinegar?" You know, they're gonna look at you like you're crazy. And that's kind of what my work is not only going after a lot of the invasive, but also I tell people you are surrounded by an incredible amount of flavors that are forgotten. This is the food of your ancestor. It doesn't matter where you come from, by the way. You can come from Europe, you can come from South America, you can come from Japan. I don't care where you're coming, or you can be Native American. You have an environment, and here are some wild flavor. And as a Native American, of course, you can go for all the native plants for sure and really explore that. And some people are doing that. And then on my side, being from European, I like to concentrate much more on the non-native and invasive plant, and then go back also to my own DNA, to my own, because I'm finding like all the plant that you find in Europe over here, mostly in Southern California, by the way. So it's a fantastic opportunity to really understand the flavor of the land as of 2025. And I have no problem also using native plant, but my philosophy is, I tend to go like 90% non-native and invasive, and then 10% of the native plant I use, and I plant them. Here's a good example. I do a lot of pickle walnuts, which is a really fantastic thing from Europe, and I collect all my. So those are kind of in danger a little bit in California, not because of forager, by the way. Those are native walnut. They're really tiny, tiny, tiny. But because people buy land and they don't want this stuff. They don't want. They have zero interest in tiny little walnuts. So my job is every year I'm going to plant. I know to sprout those guys. Those are starting to open, by the way. I already planted some outside, but I'm also giving it to friends. You can see this one is starting to open a little bit.
It's cracking open on the shell.
Yeah, so the shell is actually opening, and then probably like in a day or two, you're going to have the little shoot coming up. And so I try to give like 20 to 25 to all kinds of different people. So my job as a forager is also to preserve the environment, mostly when I'm dealing with native plant. When I do my class in Los Angeles, I do that on a private property. But when I start to making beer, I say, okay, you know what? I'm going to start planting all the native plants I make beer with. I was even too enthusiastic about it because the next year I went, shit, I have to make a lot of beer. But I planted mugwort, yarrow, California sagebrush, all those plants I actually used to make beer. So it's a fantastic journey, but it's also a journey of as a forager, not only exploring nature and also exploring traditional food preservation technique, but also exploring your relationship with the environment. And I've done mistake in the beginning. I've definitely done mistake, but you learn. It's okay to do mistake, and you learn. How to do it better. In the process. And then at this point, I would say that I would think that my activity at this point are actually beneficial for the environment. And what I'm trying to do is also promote a cuisine and say we can create a cuisine that is beneficial for the environment, or you could create an agriculture that is beneficial for the environment, as opposed to having an agriculture or even cuisine that are detrimental for the environment. Good example will be wheat, for example. Like, people are bitching about invasive plant, but wheat is okay because wheat is, we need it and it's agriculture. But wheat has destroyed 20 million acres of land.
Yeah.
So the definition of modern agriculture is kind of interesting because it's really, you're going to take the native fauna and flora, you're going to eradicate everything, and then you're going to plant no-native plant most of the time. There are exceptions, and a good exception will be corn. But then when you deal with corn, you're still going to make it GMO, and you're still going to remove everything else. I mean, I remember driving in my RV toward Wisconsin, and I remember driving for 6 to 8 hours non-stop in the middle of cornfield. Nothing else was alive.
Yeah.
You go, what the hell? So I'm not trying to change your world, but in the same time, I'm kind of like trying to give that message of, we can do better. And it's okay to connect with the environment. And it's okay to deal with the environment if you're doing it the right way.
So question for you. If, say people are new and they want to get into it, into foraging, into the way in which you describe, where's sort of the best place for them to start? Where can they progressively kind of move through the process, similar to kind of what you have?
Look at your own backyard, or even a park. I mean, I know, when I'm in LA, I will not touch anything into like some of the main park in Los Angeles, but there's a lot of invasive plants that are there. And the way I tell people, it's not that difficult. If you think about it, try to learn one plant a week. One plant a week. Start with dandelion. Come on. Like, you can even buy dandelion at the store. So you can even go like outside, pick up one, and then you go to the store, you grab one leaf and you compare it and go like, that looks okay, and there is so many different tools that exist now. You have like Facebook groups about plant identification. You have apps that are really good, scary good. Now you have even AI, by the way. It goes on and on. You have incredible tools, which I didn't have when I grew up. I had an old grandma. No, I'm kidding, but I had my grandma. But you learn one plant a week. It's not a lot. It's pretty easy to do. And then you play with it in the kitchen. Learn how to cook dandelion, because most people don't know how to cook dandelion, therefore it's disgusting and bitter. And then once you do that, by the end of the year, 50 plants. Guess what? You're already an expert. Compared to 99.99999% of the population, you're an expert, and you know as much as my grandma already. You do that for 2 years, you probably know 100 plants. So now you can give classes already. I mean, even with 1 year, you actually can give classes. I see people in LA. This is so interesting. I have like weird competition in LA. I have people suddenly giving classes. I've never heard of them. I've never seen them before. I have no idea when they went, where they learn. But they're giving plant on the basic, non-native plant. So, I mean, maybe you could give a class with, if 20 people, you know what to do with it, type of thing. So it's not that difficult. It's just, it just takes a bit of time. You can go way faster. I think when I went for it, I probably learned 200 plants the first year.
Wow.
Because I really, I really dedicated myself to it, But even at the time, so that was like 98, really, I think, when I started, there was no real tool. It was still like knowledge from people to people. The internet was still in infancy. You didn't have a lot of resource. I don't think Facebook existed or anything like that. So it was still like the old way. I had to learn. But it's not that difficult. And that would be my advice, And then, in terms of food preservation technique, again, there's like so many resources that exist. Now, you have a fantastic book about food preservation, lacto fermentation. There's probably like, if you go on Amazon, you're probably going to find like 20 to 30 different books. You can look at the review and see which one is, look at the best one based on the review. And if you really go for wild food, well, you still have mine, which is Wildcrafted fermentation. But yeah, the tools are there. The knowledge is there. It's really a matter of picking it up and spending a lot of time doing it.
I think it's interesting today. We were talking. So last week's podcast, we had AJ DeRosa from Project Upland, and we were talking about sort of the future of wild food and things like that. And on the reel that we shared on Instagram of him sort of giving his perspective, some guy was like, "Well, it's just cheaper and easier to just go get food in the food system," and I was like, "Yeah." But, you're not factoring into the fact of like, just because it's cheaper and easier doesn't mean it's better for you. It doesn't mean it's better food. And you can actually get food anywhere. Just like you're saying, Pascal, like locally.
Yeah. But I would say like 99.9999% of the population has zero interest in foraging. Mm-hmm. And that's okay. It's a choice. It's a lifestyle. Some people are vegans, some people are carnivorous, there is all kind of different lifestyle. And what I'm trying to do is to make the knowledge available for those people who choose that lifestyle. It's a choice, and it's a good thing because eventually if everybody was doing it, it's true that wild food will not be sustainable. In this case, the way it is done right now, it is super sustainable. I have yet to find a forager in the wild while I'm foraging. I mean, I did find one. It was a bunch of old grandpas in their 80s collecting curly duck, and they were all from Armenia. And curly duck is super invasive locally, and they make a soup out of it. They ferment it and actually turn it into a soup. But when people, are saying, like, foraging, people are taking from nature, it's a problem. I have never seen a forager in nature, ever. Aside from those group of old people, and the one that I've, those guys were collecting an invasive plant. So there's nobody doing it, kind of, compared to the overall population. So it's super, super, super sustainable, in my opinion. And that's okay. I don't want the whole population to do it personally. I mean, it's not that I don't want to. They're not going to do it anyway. They don't want to. Most people work from 9 to 5, and then they want to go to the store. And it's not an easy lifestyle, what I do is not, it has to be a passion, but, I'm far from being rich and making money. I'm about, it's really a lifestyle, it's living a lifestyle that you love, but it's definitely not about money. Mm-hmm. You can't.
Sure.
So good, so good, so good.
New markdowns up to 70% off are at Nordstrom Rack stores now. Fresh kicks, spring tops, new dresses. There's always a score.
I mean, the denim section is unreal.
Why do I rack? All the dresses. I always find something amazing.
Head to your Nordstrom Rack store to find can't-miss deals on all the spring things. Great brands, great prices. That's why you rack.
Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Just thinking through kind of, I guess, beyond what I'd ask, I guess if we're thinking through like North America, people in North America, if they wanted to, how can they incorporate more invasive? Like, what are some of the most common invasive things that you've seen outside kind of what we've discussed? And I know it's going to vary location to location.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can talk mostly about Southern California. I mean, I went to Colorado too, and I did travel. But, it's always, dandelion would be a good one. Mm-hmm. Like, learn to cook dandelion. Like, it's everywhere. I don't care where you live. It's everywhere. It shows up. It's one of the choice edible. It's super good for you. It's got a lot of nutrition in it. The secret for dandelion is you boil it first and then you change the water and you boil it for like 10 minutes. And then you can prepare it. You can add soy sauce. You can saute it. You can do whatever you want. You just need to remove that bitterness. People don't even know this stuff, That's what my grandma used to do. You boil dandelion and then you change the water and then you start preparing it. Locally in California, and I've seen that in many states, watercress is everywhere. Mm-hmm. Now, the problem is many streams are polluted. And as far as I know from my research, most of the watercress is invasive and non-native too. There used to be some native one over here, but when they did some DNA test, there is 2 strands left of watercress. There's one in San Diego, and there's one on an army base somewhere, and nobody can touch it, type of thing. But most of the watercress, it's totally. What else? Chickweed. Right now, we have a lot of chickweed.
It's funny. We're going to be. I just scheduled a chickweed recipe and a dandelion recipe to come out on the Harvesting Nature website in a week or two.
Yeah.
So those will be coming out for anyone interested.
And you have sow thistle, oxalis. That's another plant that tastes like lemon. The list goes on. I could probably give. Nettles. You have 2 different types of nettle that come from Europe. There's some native one too. But I'm mostly dealing with the European one. That's the one I used to make my wine. Actually, I like it better. It's way more tender. Again, also 16 different types of mustard that I have locally.
Yeah.
So same thing. This is, you can, if you don't know about fermentation, you can also, do the same thing. When you're in doubt, and that's what the Greek do with horta, that's what a lot of, old recipe used to do, is you boil it, change the water, and some people even drink the water. I usually don't do that because I'm really prone to oxalic acid. So I like to change the water and get rid of the water, which gets rid of the oxalic acid. And then you add a little bit of lemon, or you put a little bit of soy sauce, or, you can do all kind of different stuff. It's just, wild radish, good example. That's why I love, fermentation, because it really opens the door to doing countless of different, I would say, gourmet food. This is my wild radish from last year. Those are radish powder. They're absolutely fantastic when you pickle them or you ferment them. This is kind of like a kimchi a little bit,
Those are fun. I let them go in my garden last year for the first time. Just let my radishes go to seed and harvested. Did a quick pickle on the pods, and they turned out excellent.
Yeah, they're absolutely awesome. I can go outside in the mountain right now. I'm kind of like a month and a half behind in the mountain because even last night we had some snow too. But some greens are starting to show up everywhere. In a month, I just go out and collect things and I make a salad or cook wild green or soup. Mm-hmm. I mean, the applications are infinite. I'm more excited for me on my side with the more intricate flavor that the land can offer. I absolutely love to go into the weird stuff. Mm-hmm. I can show you like a weird stuff.
Yeah.
I love weird stuff.
I know. If you have a video, you can show it. This will be a good one. This thing right there. So this is your insect poop.
But
the insect poop is actually a insect honeydew. So it's actually sugar.
Oh, wow.
So you find those on eucalyptus. So what happened is in California, eucalyptus is actually kind of invasive. Yeah. And when they imported eucalyptus, they imported a little fly, kind of psyllids. And the little fly deposit a little insect on the leaves. kind of a little grub, and the little grub will suck the juice of the eucalyptus and create a little house. It looks like an igloo, like it looks like a series of igloo right there. And the house that they build is composed of probably around 50% starch, 50% sugar. The flavor profile is exactly, and the crushiness is exactly like Rice Krispie. If I was, putting like a mask on your eyes and makes you crunching, that you go, oh wow, Rice Krispie, super sweet, And it's actually insect poop. And when I say insect poop, I kind of like it's an insect excretion. Kind of like I could say, honey is bee vomit.
Yeah.
But you will say honey is an excretion because people go like, it's a poop. Well, your honey is bee vomit. And your beer is yeast pee,
Yeah.
All this fermentation process are very organic. It's things are being eaten and turned into something else. But that's a weird one. And it's an incredible one. It tastes good, but it's an incredible topping when you do like ice cream or I have another one that I like to do with a local native plant. One of my favorite dishes, I'm going to take a pear and I'm going to slice it. And then I use something called pine cone syrup. That's probably like the most, not stolen, but the most used recipe on the internet. It took me forever to figure it out, but you actually take green pine cones and you put them in a jar and you put 50% brown sugar, 50% pine cone. And then you put it in the sun. So it will start evaporating, and then all the juice from the green pine cone, which are really unripe, will go into the sugar and create a syrup. It tastes like Christmas. It's so freaking good. Excuse my French. I say frigging, by the way. So one of the dessert that I make during my class is you just take either sliced banana or an apple or a pears, and then you put a layer of the pine cone sugar, and then you put the crispy stuff on it, and it looks like $1 million. People eat it, they want to lick the plate. They're like, can I lick the plate? It's so good.
I made the syrup before. It's so good.
Yeah, me too.
Similar to like with spruce tips as well.
Yeah. And I actually went further. Now I even do it with pinyon pine branches now.
Okay.
Really?
So and also I made a whole mix with the mountains. So I actually make a mountain syrup, and it's basically a mix of pinyon pine branches, local juniper berries, white fir branches, white fir needles. I collect all kinds of different, including mugwort and all this stuff. And and I put that, I infuse it in syrup and let it age for 6 months. I love aging stuff. The only problem for me is when people took that recipe, they say it was muglio, and it's not. The inspiration when I started doing it actually came from France. Nothing to do with muglio. Actually, at the time, muglio was really muglio is a pine cone syrup, but the recipe, the way they do it is a complete secret. It could be it's the same, but this is actually coming from France. This method, and they used to do it in bucket using the white pine cone.
Okay, cool.
And I went from bucket. I'm like, can I use that in jars? But they were, there was a very obscure at the time video on the internet, like in the early 2000s, and I started experimenting with it. And then came up with this way of doing it inside the jar. But I immediately people picking up and it's muglio. I'm like, it's not muglio. I just at least give it the proper origin.
But I love that you could get all different pine cones to get different flavors or different areas, all the terroir that's involved in these things. Mine would taste different than yours.
Yeah, I mean, mine, I used the local one. So when I started to do my experiment with it, I used the pinyon pine, because those are the one that has the best flavor, And to this day, this is my favorite. I tried different pine, but the pinyon pine is like eating candy. Like it's like Christmas. It's unbelievable in terms of flavor, the different layers, So, but again, like look at this Dijon Master 2. This is completely gourmet, and I make my own mugwort beer, which is an old like Celtic and Viking type of beer, and then I turn it into vinegar. So I use my mugwort beer vinegar to actually make my my
Oh, the
mustard.
mustard. Wow.
And then the original one, when I was making it, the salt used to come from seawater evaporated, not in LA, like way above San Francisco. You know, you learn about pollution too, by the way. When I was doing research on seawater, I'm like, oh my God, like you don't want to touch anything below San Francisco. Yeah. So I went above San Francisco and I came back with like bucket and gallons of seawater, and I used my own salt for like 2 or 3 years to do fermentation. You just boil the seawater and you end up with salt. It's like, duh, you know, super easy. So, I mean, that Dijon mustard originally was 100% completely wild, you know, bacteria, wild salt, making a wine, making a beer, turning it into vinegar. I think last year I did it with using elderberry wine vinegar. Because I make elderberry wine, then you turn it to vinegar, and you know. So you cannot beat those flavor. You can't even buy those flavor. It's impossible. This is more than gourmet food, you know.
There's there's a little shop nearby where I live in my place in Quebec, and so a lot of the French have a bit more of the foraging kind of background than the English side does. And there's these little tiny pots, and I don't know. I'm trying to think of like maybe an ounce or two in it of these like spruce mustard or the kinds of things you're showing. And they're about like $10 or $12 each for for a little spoonful, basically. And you're just showing us quarts and quarts full of this stuff, and it's so easy to make at home like that. It's such an incredible gourmet item that would sell for so much in the store that you could just literally make for free.
You know, this is a good one right there that you sell in Quebec. This is your
what you call
herb salé.
Yeah, oh yeah.
But this is the herb salé that contain wild chervil, chickweed, and all the local invasive plant. This is from 2 years ago. It's still there.
Oh wow, that's so cool.
So it's just salted. So it's basically, you know, the way you use this, it's an old tradition that you find, you know, you find it in Quebec. It's still used. It's not used that anymore in Europe, to be honest. I don't see it. You know, but it originally came from the French. And it was one way to preserve the food in the gardens. You basically put so much salt. It's not even fermentation. This is salt preservation. And then instead of using salt, if you make a soup, you're going to use a little bit, like a teaspoon of the salted herb. And those salted herbs so much flavor, you know, that it really adds some flavor to your soup. But I have a whole jar right there that's been made that's 2 years ago, and it will never turn bad. It's actually kind of like improved with age. It's kind of like a wine, you know. And it smells kind of funky in a good way. You know, you can smell I can nearly recognize just by the smell all the different herbs that are inside, you know. Mostly chickweed. So you can do like fantastic herb salé with chickweed.
I'm definitely going to do that this spring.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing, it's precision-crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turning up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision-crafted performance.
Take your vibes and go.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
You know, one thing that was fascinating to me, if you don't mind me talking a little bit, is I think I completely opened the Pandora's box for me. And the biggest epiphany was when I was starting to deal with grains and seeds. And I have boxes over here of all the different stuff. I have tiny little jar now because I'm done with my book. I gave it to the publisher like 2 or 3 months ago. And I've managed to like preserve all those tiny sample of all those edible grains and seeds in jars. So I have like countless jars. But what was fascinating to me is like pretty much all the most invasive herbs that you find in California were some of my ancestor food.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to give you a good example. I'm going to go to my fridge right here. It is fruit. Let's see if I can freeze it.
We have to put this episode on YouTube, I think.
So locally, we have, for example, the most invasive grass we have locally is something called cheatgrass. And then another one is called great brome. And one of the common names that people give it would be foxtail.
Okay.
So that's the one that gets stuck in your socks. And you go, arch, it hurts, you know. And when a plant is super invasive, I become fascinated. And one of the things I found out is the thing that really hurts is this kind of very long grain. And it will even make you bleed sometimes. So you have this really kind of like nasty grain looking that you can remove the chaff around. And you end up with this flat little grain that's, you don't know what to do with it. But that's the one that's really painful that gets into your socks, and then you're going to go like, ow, ow, ow. Every single one of those grains has been found in caches in Europe, like in clay pots, with other edible grains and seeds. So I became fascinated, and I started doing some experiment on cooking them. And I ended up doing an experiment like I have a standard now is I'm going to take any grains that I'm interested to look at and cook them 50 minutes at least, which is what you do with wheat. If you had wheat, you cook them for 50 minutes. You end up with the most beautiful red rice. And I'm going to prove that to you. I just removed the chaff on that one, and look at this thing right there.
Oh, wow. So it's like it looks cool. Beautiful brown and red, like a red grain of red rice.
They found those they actually found cakes that were in Europe, in Holland, Netherlands, that were made of those grains. So it's Neolithic food from Europe.
Wow.
And if you push on it, you see there is a decent amount of starch. There you go. So it's your starch coming up.
Yeah. Huh.
So you could actually make beer if you wanted to. So it's a decent food. So the most invasive grass, or the most invasive grasses in Southern California, are food of my ancestor. You go back to Europe and Neolithic food and food from Europe. And it was interesting because I was fascinated by my own, I love looking at my own DNA and see what my ancestors will eat. And, when I was working on this book about edible grains and seeds, I didn't know. I was like, you still find information about native food, for example, locally. There's a lot of information on, what food was eaten because people started taking samples in the 1800 or mid-1800 and stuff, and they found caches too. So you have a lot of information. But in terms of like European food, for example, it was completely lost. And like, what the hell do I find information? And how could I even find recipe 4,000 years old? And I actually found the gold mine of information one day. I like this epiphany again. I'm like, you know what? I saw an article on CNN, Discovery, on the Discovery website. Guess where I found the gold mine of information in Europe about what people would have eaten in terms of grains and seeds 4,000 years ago?
Where's that?
I'll make it simple for you. Bog bodies. People you find in bogs.
Oh, bog bodies, of course.
Bog bodies.
So those are people...
Otzi, the Iceman, and the bog bodies. That makes sense.
Yeah. So those were people who basically were sacrificed like 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. And we're put into bogs, but the bogs are very acidic. So they basically preserve the bodies. Mm-hmm. And scientists were able to actually go inside some of the bodies were like super preserved. And scientists were able to go inside and look at the stomach content. And they did a complete analysis. And the analysis was so complete that you even get the recipe for it. So the main food was actually porridge. No, the thing that was fascinating is that 4,000 years ago, agriculture was already in Europe. But you look at the porridge, and the porridge contains sometimes up to 30 or 40 different wild seeds and grains.
Oh, they're getting so much nutrition from that.
Exactly. Why the hell would they do that? And they figure out that the monoculture, our ancestors knew that monoculture was not good enough. They had to go also use a lot of the wild seeds and grain for the sake of diversity and for health, and for the sake of nutrition, But I find exactly the same plant here than I find in Europe. I've redone that porridge 100% completely. Using some of the wild plant locally. You're talking like wild barley. They had some of the brome, nettles, lime squatter, which is a wild spinach, which is a relative to quinoa, which most of them actually coming from Europe. There is a couple that are native too. But the list goes on, and it was absolutely fascinating to actually find pretty much, I have a list, it's in my book, I have listed like 3 bug bodies and what was found, and up to I think 60 or 70 different wild seeds and grains sometime in those, in those porridge. Fascinating stuff.
So what would the processing look like in terms of
so this is interesting. I'm at the point now. Processing was a huge research because you have, the problem is the processing is kind of forgotten. Mm-hmm. How people used to do it. So I spent literally 2 or 3 years doing all kinds of different experiments. I'm not going to give the secret yet. I'm going to keep that one in the book. Sorry,
that's
but
I'll be buying that.
One of the worst one is trying to extract wild barley or even the great brome. Trying to do that by hand. I found a way at this point where you can go out in the morning and by the end of the day you're making bread.
Oh wow! Okay.
Wow. No, this is no joke. This is no joke. And it's a bit mechanized. So there are different methods that was used in the past. For example, great brome or even wild barley. You can collect when the grain are still a little bit green, and then you light everything on fire, and the only thing that's left over will be the slightly burned grain. This actually even explained in the Bible. That was one of the techniques people were using. And it depends. I'm going to show you another one. I'm actually doing pretty much bread every 2 weeks when I leave class in LA. I make my own bread using, I would say, 50% wild seeds, wild flowers from different grains and seeds and all that. And it takes time. But let me give you an example. I went to see my daughter in Idaho, and I was looking at the desert, and the horizon was just basically made of this plant. It's called Indian ricegrass. And if you take a look, you can see there is all those crazy black grain right there. Mm. So this is native food. And I've got at the bottom, you can see a lot more. So this is native food, and they were even exploring that in agriculture on how to grow that to make a gluten-free flour. The flour is fantastic, by the way. You can even toast it a little bit, and then you end up with a kind of like a dark brown flour. It's very, very, very common. I have all kind of different techniques to do it. One of the one that's kind of like useful is I use a comb.
Okay, that's good.
So when it is new, you basically comb it, and then you can remove, all those little seeds are in the little seed heads that you see right there. Most of them are empty at this point. But every tiny little seed head has a seeds. And the seeds is kind of weird looking, this tiny little seed. So it's a pain in the butt to extract, but a comb was useful. Then also lighting on fire. It's really like the problem is I live in Southern California. They really don't like that.
Yeah.
When you light things on fire. So don't burn the forest, people. But one thing I've learned too, and this is just serendipity, is when you just store it and you forget about it for a year, then you just need to shake it and they all fall off.
It just dries up enough that they're...
So there was a lot of serendipity sometime, and the method that I use, which is more mechanic at this point, I basically use a kitchen utensil to extract the most difficult grain. It was just by serendipity that I found it, and I'm like, holy crapola. Something that used to take me like 1 day takes me 20 minutes now.
Oh, wow.
I can extract grain from anything you want me. I can go into my yard and make bread by the end of the day. See that? Look at this. I'm going to turn the phone, but if you see that, this is all the seeds that have fallen off.
Oh, all of them.
The table's just covered in them.
Yeah, it's covered. My table is already covered. So how come you cannot buy that at the store? By the way, why not? Or how come you cannot go to the store and say, go to Whole Foods and say, give me 5 pounds of acorn Acorn is native, but it's the food of my ancestors, the food of native people, it's the food of, Korean people. It's the food of, pretty much the food of humanity to a large degree, maybe not found in Africa and stuff, but. And it's so interesting to me that you cannot go to a store like Whole Food and buy acorn. Why not? So food waste is not just non-native plant. Food waste can actually be native plant. Good example, the city that just burned in California called Altadena. Most of the road were lined up with acorn tree. I mean, like oak tree, acorn tree, oak tree. And all those acorn will fall on the ground and people will drive over it. You're talking hundreds, thousands of pounds of acorn. People just drive over it. So this is a good example where a native plant can actually be a food waste in some condition,
Yeah, definitely. So have you been brewing beer with grains and seeds as well? Because I know you did a whole book on wild brewing, which we're very interested in. Have you been doing with the grains as well?
I've not done it because it's so valuable to me.
Okay.
That it would take so much time. So most of my beer are actually gluten-free. And what I do is actually use molasses, which, by the way, is historical too. Not a lot of people know that. It's most historical in what is historical in Europe, but also was historical in colonial time in North America, where you would take molasses and turn them into beer. Which, of course, when you go online, you're going to get some beer. People go like, this is not a real beer. It doesn't have the grain, and it doesn't have the hops. Well, there is definition number 2 of beer, which is an alcoholic beverage or not, made with plants, roots, etc. A good example would be root beer. So, yeah, it's a beer. Yeah. I always get people going like, neither not a beer. This is not a true cheese. I'm making herbal wine. This is not a wine. Well, no, there is definition of wine that will actually fit to using plants and herbs. Yeah, but I could do it. It's just I would rather, to be honest, more use my grains and seeds for making breads and stuff like that. I've done some very simple one. I've done kind of like an alternate version of it when I took some of my wild. It technically becomes a beer. I took some of the mix of wild oats and wild barley, and then I boiled it, and then I did add some sugar to it, and then made a beer out of it.
Okay.
But what I did is I was roasting the grains too, so you end up with kind of like a smoky beer, which is super interesting. So it is milder. It's kind of like a beer, maybe with like 3 or 4% alcohol, kind of like what we used to call in Europe a small beer.
Small beer, yeah. Okay.
That people will have drunk when they were like, working in the field or whatever. Yeah. So it was kind of like some kind of version using wild grains and seeds of a small beer, the way it was. No, I would not say the way it was done, but I'm sure that people were doing it too.
Yeah. Could you walk us through how you'd make a classic kind of wild beer out of leaves and seeds and roots?
If you go back, when I was studying wild beer and fermented beverage, if you go back in time, it's very, very, very simple. You basically boil something. So you're going to be boiling the plant. The average time for hops is a bit higher. I think for hops is 45 minutes, if I recall. I don't use that much hops anymore. The only hops I would use would be wild hops anyway. But for other plants like yarrow, mugwort, and all this stuff, which are kind of like plants that were traditionally used by the Celt and Viking for brewing, like 25 to 30 minutes is actually good enough. But the principle is you're basically going to boil things. If you're using grain, you're going to be using malted grain. That means grain that were slightly germinated. So the sugar content, I'm not going to go into the detail, but there's a more sugar content. If you are using molasses, you just put molasses or brown sugar, by the way. Brown sugar works terrific too. Brown sugar and molasses will give you the flavor profile a little bit of a beer, just so you know.
Okay.
White sugar is most used for wine because it's very neutral. Herbal wine, same thing. But once you go into molasses and brown sugar, you can go to wild beer once it's fermenting. So I use molasses. And then, so you basically boil it for 25 minutes, you cool it down, and then you have to add yeast. So you add your yeast, and then you're going to ferment it for approximately like 10 to 15 days. Kind of like what's happening right now in the bottle. You can see there's a bubble coming through. So I'm going to be fermenting that. If it was a beer, I would ferment that for 10 to 12 days. And then I bottle it and I wait 3 weeks. That's it.
So does it get carbonated in the bottle? Like bottle condition?
Yeah, so it gets carbonated in the bottle. I can show you. This is one of my mugwort beer that's from 311. And put my hand on top. There you go. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's a beautiful sound.
This is about to come out. It is. People are completely in love with it. I do a class and it's always sold out. Even people who don't like beer will try that and go like, "This is fantastic." And then it's really cool for people who are gluten-free or want to have a gluten-free diet. You know, I had a girl, 2 weeks ago, I was serving that, she nearly cried. She's like, "I've never had a beer," you know. Oh. So, and I don't mind, you know, I don't care about gluten. I just happen to be using, brown sugar or molasses, therefore it ends up being gluten-free to some degree. But all the plants that I use are very traditional. And by the way, if you look at the history of beer, there's a friend of mine who wrote a book, I have this right over there. It's called The Botany of Beer. And this is the size of the book. It's 3 inches thick, 8.5 by 11. You're talking hundreds.
Wow.
You know, and locally it's interesting. So locally I have some native plant, and native people don't make beer. I didn't make beer at the time, but I'm from Belgium. So I look at the family of plants, like those are Artemisia, and they have been used culinary-wise so for thousands of years. So I can take those plants and, like we have a native mugwort called Artemisia douglassiana, and then we have also a sagebrush called Artemisia californica. And immediately when I tasted those, like, this is beer. This is absolutely beer. Like I can, you know. So this one is actually a mix of local yarrow, California sagebrush, and mugwort put together. Very aromatic plant, very bitter too. Bitter as a flavor profile, but the simplicity of it, and if you get the book, it's called the Wildcrafting Brewer. Is basically you boil the crap of a bunch of plants, you add some sugar, you cool it down, you add your yeast, you ferment it, and then you bottle it.
Wow.
And the details are how long you're doing this. But this is the way people used to make stuff. And for a long time, by the way, women were the one brewing. Women were in charge of brewing. And then the men showed up, and then with our testosterone, we make things very complicated. You have to buy equipment and beer, and you have to like spend thousands of dollars, and it has to go into a barrel and age. But if you go back in time, it's basically a tea, and you ferment it, and you end up with something delicious. And I went back to that, and it was fascinating. I have clay pots, so I collect my own clay and make my own pottery too, by the way. So this is my fermented clay pot, and this is primitive. So instead of using the swing top, I have a little bowl right there that keeps the top, and I put leaves under it. So it basically just put pressure. I can get some carbonation, but it's really an open fermentation, and you stir it. So you stir, and if you stir it, it also stir all the acidity that's inside it. It will not turn bad as long as you work with it. It's impossible, because it becomes very acidic. So you don't have mold or weird stuff happening. And you do that for 4 or 5 days, or a week, and you end up with a beverage like a primitive beer with 5% alcohol. You can do that with juice. And native people, not locally, but I know they did that for sure with the prickly pear, for example. But if I go back to my ancestry in Belgium, and based on some archaeology, I love archaeology, I study a lot, but archaeological book, they found a remnant of beer in some tombs in clay pots, so I was able to kind of like redo some of those formula. And people didn't give a shit about, is it from grain or is it this? People will mix stuff all the time. So they will take, for example, some wild plum, and the juice will be enough to give you like 3 or 4% alcohol, and then they will add honey to it, and then they will add something else to it. So people were mixing stuff There was no label. I mean, the only reason, by the way, the state, in my opinion, based on my research, the only reason the state will start to put label on things and put regulation on alcoholic beverage like wine and beer and say, from now on, you can only make beer from hops and grains, is because if you do that, you can tax it and you can force them. You can force people to do it.
Then they're not making it.
But if you go back in time, people were brewing things all the time in clay pot with, plant they will find in the wilderness, So I go back to that a lot. And those flavors are incredibly delicious, by the way.
It's funny. So the pot he's holding is like a brown kind of ceramic pot with a lid being held down with a stick. And I was in South Africa a few years ago, and we went to this traditional kind of South African restaurant, and I ordered the traditional beer. I can't remember what it's called now, but it came in a pot just like, maybe it was that, yeah. Came in a pot just like that, and I felt like a bit of a fool because everyone was watching me the whole restaurant drinking out of this huge bowl of beer, but it was sour and smoky and really interesting flavor, but that's exactly what I thought of when you pulled that out.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
Yeah, and this one will be a little bit different. So the one, Buza is actually really made from grain.
Okay, yeah.
So this one is like really sour and, this one is way more herbal. So because I will use like maple syrup and honey, and I mix, and then some berries that are sweet, and then add some plants. So it's a bit different from a grain base, but again, this is what people will have done in the old days. The shaman will have picked up some of the honey locally, put some magic mushroom in it, put some mugwort there, and make some brew that way either psychotropic. You can make beer that are medicinal. I was shredding my mint over here. This is horehound, super invasive in California, but it's used in cold and flu. You actually find it in Ricola. So the Ricola you buy at the store has horehound.
Didn't you used to make candies a long time ago with horehound?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yes, I have candy in the fridge. I make that for my class.
Okay.
But was also used in the past as a bittering agent for beer. Willow bark was also used as a bittering agent for beer, but it contains salicinin, which is aspirin. So you can make medicinal beer. If you have fever or the flu, I will use horehound. I will use, bark. I will, give you probably a little bit of wild lettuce to put you to sleep. So, and then some fruits and berries to give you vitamin C. So you can do very medicinal herb. You can do very psychotropic. When I was in Colorado, it was legal. Not that I will do that in California, but in Colorado, I was using magic mushroom, where you can make a beer using magic mushroom if you want to, and other psychotropic herbs. Or you can do it for flavor. Right now, a lot of the beer that I'm doing, I really brew for flavor. You go to the store, it's like boring,
I love the endless flavors that are like endless, infinite possibilities. So cool.
Yeah, and right now, I think I'm going to be, without knowing it, I'm working on a new book about herbal wine. I have a whole shelf that I'm experimenting, and those were, in the old days, not everybody had access to grapes. So there's a tradition in France where we go like, okay, well, I don't have access to grapes, but I have access to very interesting herbs that are very yummy, or even leaves. And, I always function with epiphany, by the way. I try things that blows my mind. And last year I did a very weird wine that is usually made with with oak leaves. And I decided to do that one because that sounds terrible.
Yeah, very tannic.
Come on, like oak leaf, that's terrible. That's going to be tannic. And you use young oak leaf. And I chew on it, they were like, no way. I'm like, no way, this can't be good. But I did it anyway, It's the best wine I've ever made. Wow. After aging, once you age it, the tannin in the leaf completely change it and make it taste like it's been aged a bit in an oak barrel. And those weird flavor that you will get kind of become nutty and earthy in the same time. And I tasted that 6 months and go like, oh my God, this is like a virgin territory, completely like forgotten stuff. People used to make wine with birch leaves, with walnut leaf, for example, with oak leaves. There's probably 7 different trees that people used to use the leaves with. There is some that I know, and you have dandelion wine, for example. Nettle wine is a classic too. But suddenly I find myself surrounded by things that have never been done. I'm doing a mountain wine right now, which is a mix. I love to do like whole environment. So I'm doing a mountain wine and forest wine. And I just go into the forest and create my own blend based on the knowledge and experience I've gained over 20 years of doing stuff. I've done bad stuff in the beginning, by the way. I've sinned. I've done really bad things. But over time, you get better, you know. And then I'm turning it into wine. So I have an example here. And I have like 3 different type of wild mints. I have a little bit of lemon. So I'm okay, you know. Juniper berries, white fir. I have Mormon tea. I have Yerba Santa. I have a little bit of pinyon pine somewhere.
Oh, talk about terroir and it's something, eh?
Yeah. So basically,
just
just take the whole mountain.
Yeah.
This is the mountain, so I did the whole mountain and create a wine out of it. And then I work with it all the time. And if you see the label, it has the history of it.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
like first I started fermenting it for 2 weeks, then I aged it into a barrel. I removed it from the barrel, I added 200 grams of sugar, then I did a new maceration inside. So I have to kind of like reinvent, I'm sure, like once I reinvent things, I go back and like, yeah, it's been done before. But, you know, but you didn't know that, so you could not find it before. So I do a double maceration. So I do my wine with the same thing, and it's like it is okay, but then I'm going to take the finished wine and I took the same herb and I put them back again, and I'm aging them in it. And it brings the flavor like boosted to a new level. You know? So it's basically a double. It doesn't ferment anymore, it's just maceration at this point, but it's the same herb that were fermented in the beginning. So I'm kind of like figuring out new technique to get the best flavor. You know, so
That's
it's very
great.
non-traditional.
Yeah, I'm in love with that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Yeah.
again, you have to be like special in the head to do stuff like that.
I think one of my friends here in Maryland, you know the pawpaw, the fruit? He's making
pawpaw,
he's making liqueurs with it.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it is amazing. Adam, I have some when you come here on Sunday. I've been saving some. He's made that in the black walnut. Is it Nocino? The wine? Yeah. With black walnuts.
You have to take a look at this one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that.
This one is look at the bottle.
Oh, wow, it's been
so
there.
There's
Wow,
like cobwebs everywhere, and
it's an old bottle
from 2013. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
So I want to age that one for like another 20 years to give that to my kids. No, I would like to drink it before I die. But I have some that are like 20 years old, you know, that I did in the early 2000. This one is from 2013. Nocino only gets better with age, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, the possibility again are infinite. But this one is made with the native walnuts, the black walnuts. You know, yeah, crazy fun.
I'm feeling
that's awesome.
So inspired right now.
Yeah, I think you've opened my mind too. My head's just like churning. I'm like, oh, this is great.
Yeah.
But if you guys are hunter, you know all the things you can do with meat. You know, I remember in early 2010s, I was looking at different restaurants like Favicon I think it's Sweden.
Sweden, I think, yeah.
Well, they use like Viking technology to preserve their meat in beeswax, for example. Age this stuff for like they're gonna basically age it for months and years, and your meat end up tasting like cheese type of thing. It's like you go like, oh my god, that sounds so gross, but I would love to try it.
Yeah, I want to try it.
Yes, yeah.
You know, and that fermentation applied to meat would be interesting, like miso and all this stuff. You know. I only use stuff I can forage, so I don't do miso. I use like, I have 4 different bacteria I can forage, so I can make wine, I can make vinegar, I can make, and I can make lacto-fermentation. So lactobacteria, acetobacter, and yeast. And then there is another one is I can make natto using dry mustard and dry herb. The bacteria exist on it, and you can
it gets the same
natto.
Sticky kind of texture.
Like the disgusting, like
So natto, for anyone who doesn't know, is like kind of fermented soybeans in a certain fashion. That's really kind of slimy.
So you can use wild bacteria. You can use wild bacteria to do that. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
Oh, that's really cool. Well, thank you so much for the time that you've spent with us today. It's been phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I talk a lot.
No, that's good.
no, you like it's great. Do you have anything sort of as we close up? Anything you want to leave the listeners with or us with? Any kind of last thought?
Yeah, I think the more people do it, the more the more you can actually work the environment, actually helping it. And I think it would be fantastic if people were looking at, taking care of the environment and how they can create a cuisine that is actually beneficial for the environment. And also reducing the food waste of not using all those resources, like the black mustard, for example, because other people are going to try to get rid of it and they're not going to be using it as food. They're going to be spraying, harmful chemical to the environment, or they're going to throw it away, which is food waste. Mm-hmm. So it's it's basically a philosophy of trying to, work with nature and how to actually, as a forager, nature becomes important to you. So how do you preserve it and how do you help it? And if you use native plants, plant them. If I plant one walnut tree, it will bring to the future generation more walnut than I could even take in one lifetime. And that's so, when people sometimes give me shit going like, oh, you're touching, native plant, but I plant them. I plant them. I actually plant them more than I will ever take. So I've probably planted like, I don't know, who knows how many walnut trees I've planted all over the place, And I think that's the best approach on how to do it. The problem, I don't think the problem of the forager, your real problem will be city expansion, will be habitat, destruction. Agriculture is one big guilty, modern agriculture. And there is no escaping it because we have too many people now.
Yeah.
I don't think you can abandon, modern agriculture, but it can be a choice. And it can be your choice. It can be your choice of saying, I opt out from that. And what I'm trying to do is to find a way so that you can, in my future generation, can opt out and say, I don't want to be the 99.99%. I want to be somebody who still use some very traditional plant, and that's okay. Mm-hmm. And there is space for you to do that, Right now it's difficult, because all the regulation are kind of against you a little bit. And that's why I deal a lot with non-native and invasive plant, because if you want to give me shit, then I'm going to put you on YouTube and see how you look. Oh my God, he's stealing dandelion from nature and he's stealing black mustard from nature. Good luck with that. Mm-hmm. And I have access probably through friends that I've known over the year. I probably have access to 2,000 acres. And this is where I can, plant my native plant and all this stuff too, and have access to it. Anyway, there you go.
Yeah. Adam, last thoughts.
Thank you so much for imparting some of your wisdom and your obvious passion that comes through. It's been great to finally meet you. I recommend everyone grab Pascal's books. You have 4 out right now, I believe. It sounds like there's one on the
4,
way.
Yeah, 4, and so I have the first one is called The New Wildcrafted Cuisine. Then I have 3 books about fermenting, and then the last book coming probably like 3 or 4 months will be about edible grains and seeds. And I think that one will be a game changer.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one.
People.
Yeah,
that will be a game changer because there's a lot of technique on how to extract those grains, and I think people just don't know. Mm-hmm. This is really forgotten knowledge about. There is no books on edible grains and seeds.
Yeah. I've looked in the past, so I'm excited. Yeah. I find your books incredible, super informative. Everything's easy. I have the vinegar one in the mail right now, so I'm really looking forward to cracking it open when it arrives. So I recommend anyone who wants to try any of this stuff out, grab some of his books and go at it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'm excited, Pascal. Thanks for coming on today. You like the conversation that we've had, sort of, as I mentioned earlier, my mind is open now, and that's what I love about podcasting is I get to just have these great conversations with amazing people that are really passionate and just willing to share knowledge, and it inspires me. I can think, my life and evolution of going through and living the places I've lived, and now I get to take that, and it's funny because each one of these conversations gets a little bit into my mind, and then I look at something out in nature and I'm like, I'm going to do something different with that, or I'm going to, it gives me a new approach, and that excites me, because then I take my kids out and I'm like, hey, check this out, and then they get obsessed about it, and then they're like, Dad, what mushroom is this, or what plant is this? Can we eat it? And it's great. I love it.
Yeah, totally.
But thanks again.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thanks everybody out there for listening. We'll throw all the show notes we'll show the links into the show notes, and get everything out there so you can get to all the links, the books, everything. Learn more about Pascal's passion for wild food, and thanks everybody for listening. I appreciate it. Whatever podcast platform you're listening to, please punch that 5-star button. Leave us a review. Tell us we're doing right, or tell us we're doing wrong. Thanks everybody. Have a good night.